Some of Warrington's history is proudly on display across the town. The golden gates outside of the town hall gifted by Queen Victoria, the statue of Oliver Cromwell in front of the academy, the transporter bridge just down the road from Bank Quay. But one piece of Warrington's past has been forgotten. Until now.
Was a part of Warrington's story lost to time? I think there was. It was this great big castle in the middle of Warrington that nobody was seemingly talking about. I would love for us to come back in 2027 and involve this entire community around a community-based archeological project.
That's Keith Myers, founder of Avimmerse and the lead on the Warrington Castle project, a community-led project to unearth Warrington's lost castle. Welcome to the Warrington Scoop. I'm Charles, and this is the podcast that highlights the people, events, and stories of the Cheshire town of Warrington. Before I chat to Keith, are you getting the Warrington Scoop in your email inbox every week? Go to warringtonscoop.co.uk, sign up for free and receive information of local events and feel-good news from across our town every Monday and Friday. That's warringtonscoop.co.uk. One of the things that I know readers of the Warrington Scoop newsletter love is history content. Whenever we put out anything on social media or within the newsletter itself about something to do with Warrington's past, you absolutely go mad for it. So this month, I'm delving into some of our town's history. I went down to the tea rooms at St Elphin's Park and the pavilion there to have a chat with Keith Myers, somebody who is behind a project to find Warrington's lost castle.
My name is Keith Myers. I'm an immersive technologist. I work with new cutting-edge technologies from drones, film, LiDAR, 3D modelling. So I've worked with that technology for a number of years. And of late, I've started to get into archaeology and look at hidden histories around us.
Also at the tea rooms, Warrington Borough Councillor Jean Flaherty.
I'm Jean Flaherty. I'm the deputy leader of the council and also the local councillor for the area where we are here, Fairfield and Howley. Part of my responsibility on the council is being the whole heritage portfolio, but also mainly I'm here as a volunteer with the Friends of St Elphin's Park.
I was born in Warrington. When I was growing up, I didn't know anything about the history. There was some history teachings in school, in primary school. That was more to do with the RAF base and the Roman Warrington. I didn't know there was a castle in Warrington. I didn't know there was this ancient ground around here. And when I was baptised in 2007 at St Elphin's Church, I found out about the ancient history around this site. So I found out about the Romans that used it as a crossing point to the ancient ford in Warrington. I found out about the ancient Druid burial ground. That's what the late Mike Finlay said. And then I got really curious and I went travelling around. I was very fortunate to go travelling around the world. I learnt a lot of history, global history. And then I went to university actually and I started to specialise in digital technology. And through that practice, through film, I started to work with things like drones. I started to work with archaeologists. And actually, through my collaborations with archaeologists at the University of Manchester, I told them about this castle, this ancient castle in Warrington. And then what happened was we started to look at the old maps and we started to look at the area. And what we found was that there was this great big castle in the middle of Warrington that nobody was seemingly talking about.
So I've lived here for 23 years. I don't think until about 10 months ago, I knew that Warrington had a castle. I saw you do a talk at Warrington TEDx back in, was that late October, early November?
Last December.
And that was really the first proper time that I understood that there was something here. So first of all, I mean, it's the most obvious question in the world because you go to, I don't know, anywhere in Wales from here, there's castles nearly on every corner. Some of them derelict, some of them really well preserved. You can't even see it here. But the fact is that it's not necessarily the type of castle that we might be thinking of and dreaming of in our minds. Can you just, Keith, give us a bit of a brief description of what it might have looked like?
What we're dealing in Warrington is a Motte and Bailey castle. So that is a timber construction, and a motte, coming from Old French, meaning a clod of earth, on top of which you would put a tower or keep. And then we had a great big moat around the entire structure, and this would have been the bailey or the living area of the people that lived in this castle. But the thing is, in Warrington, albeit that was the largest motte and bailey in the county of Lancashire at the time, we think it was never fortified into stone. And that's probably one of the reasons why it doesn't survive today, because the castles that needed to remain a military stronghold were fortified into stone. And this is why, for example, Wales, I believe, is the most densely populated castle place in the world. There's more castles in Wales than anywhere else. And that's to do with the struggles with the fearsome warriors, the Welsh, against the Normans for hundreds of years. So the Normans built a series of castles down the entire breadth of the border that changed multiple times, called the Marches. But what we've got here in Warrington is probably the most important crossing point at the River Mersey. We know that the Romans had a ford here. We know that this area where we are today was a fertile land. It was marshland, actually, but it would have been a significant strategic point on that River Mersey. And if you look at the River Mersey, where it goes, it's got that kind of bend, and where the weir is today, that's actually a natural bend that's been man-made to increase that stretch, so we can work the river, the banks. And then what happened much later on is that was industrialised. And by the 13th century, the castle disappeared. So it was built in the 12th century. By the 13th century, it's been burnt down. So this wooden structure has disappeared. But what's really, really interesting about Warrington is it's probably one of the most overlooked parts in the region. And that's another reason for that, is because we're in between two cities. We've got Liverpool and Manchester, but they're relatively new things. They're quite new in the grand scheme of things. If you look at the old towns like Warrington, Stockport, Bury, these old villages, these old towns, they're the custodians of the ancient history. When these parishes were joined together to create larger towns or cities, and when the new town comes in Warrington in the 70s, a lot of this landscape's changed, which is why we can't see it today. So when the housing estate comes in the 70s, it disappears again. But actually, in the 19th century, it was flattened to make way for an orphanage.
Right.
So that's the only. There's a little bit of other archaeology, but the most tangible archaeology was done by Dr. James Kendrick, and he did that in 1841, and he then wrote about it 12 years later in 1853, and he talks about the mount or the mound at Moat Hill, and they found various artefacts there. But what's really, really interesting about what Dr. Kendrick says is that he didn't have the personnel to do this job properly. He was the archaeologist at the time, and he actually says that if you're looking at this site in the future, know that we didn't have time to log everything. We've filled it all in the moats. And that's really interesting clue from the past. And fast forward today, we think this could be a very important site. There's lots of clues here that actually there might be archaeology here. So we don't know that. We're theorising that. We have found something, and we need to test that now. So that's where we are.
So we believe that the castle was here in the 12th century, 12th, 13th century.
12th century, yes.
12th century, so 1100s. Yes. I always have to do that to make sure I get it right. It's terrible. And obviously now here in 2026, I mean, that's hundreds of years have gone past, and therefore there's hundreds and hundreds of years of it just not existing anymore. And while, you mentioned the castles in Wales as an example, a lot of those are still stood, or at least you've got foundations you can go around. We don't have anything necessarily here. So you mentioned that there's clues. Like what? Because, I mean, first and foremost, we're here in St Elfrins Park, and the first thing that I notice is that it's flat. You've been talking about there, essentially, a wooden castle on a hill.
much later than the original castle, we had Fairfield Hall on the opposite side of the A57 here. And the park would have been the formal gardens. So if you have a look at the grass at the front now, you'll see, because it's been dry for a good stretch, you can still see the pattern of those formal gardens underneath the grass. So much deeper down, Keith will verify that more than me, but to me that is, obviously we can see that in more recent history, the legacy of what was there can still be seen to the naked eye. With the technology that Keith's got available, we can see much further back. And so I imagine it'll be that kind of thing that we'll find, that we're not going to find a buried castle like the Statue of Liberty in the Planet of the Apes, are we?
So the suggestion here isn't that the land that we're sort of sat on right now has been piled up and up and up for centuries, and therefore underneath we're expecting to find some kind of foundation, and therefore we'll find that hill? Or am I wide of the mark?
So a fair field is a field that has a fair in, and that's the etymology where we get the name from. So these clues, you question, Giles, was about where the clues are in the landscape. We've got Moat Hill Court, okay? So that translation, Moat, or Moat Hill Court, if you like, so essentially that is Hill Court, which is kind of not a great translation, but that's essentially what it means. We've got St. Elphin, Sanctus Elphin. So we know that St. Elphin, there was a record in the Domesday Book of 1086 that put Sanctus Elphin in this area. So we know, or we believe, that it was an ancient chapel, Anglo-Saxon church here, and we believe that the ground was already occupied when the Normans came. And just going to the other point about what we might find and what we might not find, Jean's very, very right. What we're talking about is what's called intangible heritage. This is heritage that, although there's no physicality on the surface, when we walk around, we can actually see it in the landscape. So we've used old maps using map regression, and we can actually see the outline where the castle used to be. And actually, there's a bit more to it than that, because what we think we've found is the moat of the castle. The next stage is a carefully controlled archaeological investigation, and to do a controlled excavation, a very precise point at that moat, or what we think is a moat, to determine whether or not there's anything that survives there. True, we wouldn't find a castle, it's not underneath the ground, but it was the most significant site in the northwest for the river crossing, I would argue, and also probably a seat of great power. But it's been forgotten, this place. And it's that thing, my own practice, what I'm doing in this space, what I'm really interested in is finding hidden histories beneath our feet. And that really goes back to that TEDx talk last year, which was about looking at the everyday and actually reconnecting people to their sense of place. Because what I think is really, really important is that people understand their own importance and where they live. And we should encourage people to reconnect to their local heritage, their local history, and make people feel a sense of a local pride again. And that's what I want to do, really, with this project, ultimately.
So moving on to the project then, in that case, there's a Kickstarter which is live right now. You're looking to raise £15,000. And as you mentioned just then, that is to fund this small, controlled next stage investigation. The only real reference point that I've got to archaeology, you're going to laugh, I know, is Time Team.
Me too.
So is that the kind of thing that we might expect, as long as we hit the target, that we'd be looking at doing first, or is that actually much further down the line?
So this stage is about ground truthing what we've found. We've done some surveys. I've done some drone surveys. I think I found something that's been verified by some independent archaeologists. Now we have tested that theory with some ground penetration tools, some geophysics called, and you're essentially scanning the magnetic signal of the ground, and we think we found where that moat of the castle was, and that corresponds with the ancient maps. So we do it using a number of tools and techniques, and these experts that I've brought together through the University of Manchester, through Civic, a guy called Ollie, he's an archaeologist, Ollie Cook from Civic Archaeology. This is commercial. This is why the fees are perhaps a little bit higher than normal at the moment, because we don't have a time team, because we don't have a local collective of archaeologists. But there's a growing desire from people all across Warrington getting in touch. They want this to become a Warrington Time Team moment. I would love for us to come back in 2027 and involve this entire community around a community-based archaeological project. But it very much depends on what we find. I've got to make sure that I'm working with Jean, I'm working with the council and making sure there's due diligence. We're doing this as a private funded expedition. We're not, we're looking for that fund in a moment, but that will translate into something much different if and when we get the Kickstarter funded. So that's the process. So this could be a much larger project, and I genuinely think, from all the evidence I've looked at, I'll go out on a limb here, and I think we're onto something. But that's on me, because I can't guarantee that until we've dug down.
I suppose, though, really, the fact that we're here and we're at this stage of it, there is, regardless of whether there's anything physical at the end of it, there is still something historical that has come out of this. This is not just a case of, worst comes to the worst, we dig and we find nothing. We've still uncovered an awful lot of history. There's things that you have said there make perfect sense to me. Warrington as a location, it's exactly the same now, really. We've got the M62, the M56, the M6. We've got the Mersey. We've got the ship canal. All of that transport link, it's just modernised from what it would have been back in the 12th century, where it would have just been the Mersey.
Older, Charles, even older.
I think the oldest map in the museum is 1433, and that shows the hill where the castle was. It shows what was then still St Elphin's Church, but very different to it being now. It shows White Cross, which is a significant area the other side of town, and Red Bank is figures on it. The rest of it is kind of fields. But the significant bit was that at that point, this was the town centre.
Yeah.
Church Street then developed into having St Andrew's Fair, which is why Church Street is so wide. The fair, and there's still, I think it's a 12-something royal decree that we can hold a St Andrew's Fair market in Church Street. It's by royal decree. We wouldn't do it, and the council would have something to say. But it's just interesting that that's what that street is, and that's why it's so wide. And I think the things that Keith's bringing to the fore now, as he says, people want to understand their history about their place and relate to it, and it gives you that feeling of being home, and that you can go out and do something and you can make something of your life, but home is still here, and there's something nice and strong about it. It's been here for a long time.
Yeah, and exactly, and I think it was approximately the 1250s, and that was when Warrington got its first market charter.
Yeah, that's it.
And from that, you can see the fingerprints. The Church Street is much wider. But going back to what we were just talking about a moment ago, Warrington now is that central hub for business. It's one of the most commercially viable places in the northwest for logistics. And because it's connected to all these different places, you've got the M56, the M6, 62. That's why you've got all the Amazon here and all these distribution companies, Asda, etc. But if you think about 1,000 years ago, you have the River Mersey. Those are the motorways of the day.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it's not changed. It is still a very significant transport hub. And I think that we don't realise how important a place Warrington was in that story. And this story hasn't really been told enough around this town. We had the largest castle here. It was probably the most important point crossing between the ancient kingdoms of Mercia and Northumbria, those two ancient Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. You had the Romans here. They probably thought it was the most important point crossing across that Mersey. We found in the 19th century these ancient chess pieces. Are they Scandinavian? Were Vikings coming here? We don't know. We don't know the origins of those. It's been theorised. But I'm really interested. If we've only found 2 chess pieces, a little bit of pottery, and some other fragments, then what else is here?
There is that magical thing, isn't there, about the plausibility that there could be something. And I appreciate that you are being very, very candid to sort of say, I am speculating here, as, you know, it might be speculation through knowledge. However, I don't want to say it's definitely here, because until I've got my hands on the evidence that states absolutely undeniably that it is here, you don't want to go and I appreciate that so much. But there is an excitement about the possibility and the fact that you are so far on with this. You've done, you know, your drone surveys, the other aspects of checking the maps through history and comparing it to now and what we can see from the sky. There is enough there, I think, for us to basically get excited a little bit. And that's why, therefore, I think the Kickstarter will be an absolutely fantastic thing, which leads me on to how can people support it? Where do we go from here?
Absolutely. So Warrington needs your help. We need to understand whether or not we're actually dealing with a medieval castle. Is there ancient structure here? Was a part of Warrington's story lost to time? I think there was. But there's only one way we're going to find out. We can't stop here. We need to raise this fund, and then this will unlock so much. Even if we don't find remnants of this castle, the fact that we've done this and we're exploring the history of this region, that's already opened up so many conversations. I'm literally speaking to archaeologists from Devon, Torrington. They've done castle projects. I'm speaking at Chester this week about this castle project, the Festival of Ideas. I've been speaking to, believe it or not, UNESCO, and they're actually looking at Warrington, this project, as a flagship example of how you join up different people. So what we've been doing is working with people, various people across Warrington, including Jean, the Friends of St Elphin's group, and we've been working with different groups for the Warrington Castle Collective. We're bringing all these people together, and now we're starting to pool all these resources. So we're going to really look at this together, and we've got the local expertise really growing in archaeology, map interpretation, volunteering. So it's really exciting. So if you want to back this project, Kickstarter, you can do that. Make a pledge. Go to warringtoncastle.co.uk. You'll see all over the website there's a link to Kickstarter. And even if you just buy a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, your cup of tea or coffee, you will be helping understand our forgotten part of Warrington's past just by that one small action. Equally, if you're a business and you're listening to this, we want to shout about your contribution to this project. Get involved. There is sponsorship. This is becoming a huge opportunity. So back the project if you can. warringtoncastle.co.uk.
Fabulous. There will be links to the Kickstarter, to the website, to the Facebook page. There is a lot of information online, a lot of places where you can touch base with the project. Please do click those links, go and find out more, and then back the project as well on Kickstarter.
And our Facebook page, Warrington Castle.
And the Facebook page as well. Brilliant. Thanks so much for speaking to me, Keith. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks to yourself, Charles, and thanks, Jean, for coming in and chatting to us as well.
Very well.
Yes, thank you to both Keith and to Jean for chatting to me. As I said there, if you want to get involved, all of the links talked about, including the Kickstarter, are in the show notes. Go and support something that is going to be potentially huge for our town. Thank you for listening to the Warrington Scoop. If you've enjoyed this episode, share it with someone who didn't know Warrington had a castle either. And don't forget to sign up to the newsletter to stay in the know with events happening in and around Warrington. There's links to that in the show notes. We'll see you next month. Goodbye.
Thank you.